Hello everyone and welcome to Tech with NK. In this video, I'm going to propose a solution to the exercise Bitcoin Price Index from CS50's Introduction to Programming with Python. I'm going to show you how I went about to solve this exercise. However, my aim is just to provide you with a few tips or ideas that you could use to build upon while solving the exercise later on your own. So that said, let's look at the exercise and see what's expected from us. I'm going to skip all of these and come to this point. And if we look at this, we are told to create a Python file, we call it bitcoin.py. And our program should expect the user to specify as a command line argument the number of bitcoins n that they would like to buy. And if that argument cannot be converted to a float, the program should exit via sys.exit with an error message, which we're going to see in the demo later on. Also, our program should be able to query the API from CoinDex Bitcoin Price Index using this link, and this should return a JSON object, among whose nested keys is the current price of the Bitcoin as a float, and we should be able to catch any exceptions with code like this. This could result probably from a request error. And lastly, our code should output the current cost of n Bitcoins in USD, that's in US dollars, to 4 decimal places, using the comma as a thousand separator. And if I scroll down, we'll see that we've been given a number of hints. The first is we've been told to use the module sys to check the command line arguments passed by the user. Secondly, we've been told that in the request module, we should use the functions, or rather the methods get and JSON. The method get should enable us get the data from the Coinbase website, and the method JSON should enable us format that data. And in case you don't have the request method installed already, you can do so with a pip command. You say pip install request. And in this box, we can see what the data would look like from the Coinbase website. And as we can see, this is a dictionary with a lot of information, but basically what we need is this line here. That is the Bitcoin rate in USD. You can take some time to pause the video, look at the dictionary to understand all of its content, but like I said, this is the only line that really matters to us. There's the rate in pounds and in euros, but for this exercise, that's not necessary. And if we keep scrolling down, there's another hint that will be quite useful. We are told that we can format our output to 4 decimal places using this line of code. So looking at the demo, we see that when we run our code bitcoin.py, if the user runs this code without any argument, this is what the code should return, missing command line argument. So when I said earlier that our code should return a message with sys.exit, this is the message we are supposed to return, that is missing line argument. And if the user runs the code with an argument that cannot be converted to a float, like in this example, bitcoin.py, and then the user entered cat, our code should return command line argument is not a number. But if the user runs the code with the right arguments, say 1, 1.5 or 2, our code should be able to return the right output. I think with this the exercise is clear enough, and I'll just open VS Code and we'll write the code together. You'll notice I went ahead to create the Python file bitcoin.py as expected from us in the exercise, but I think by now you should be able to do this on your own. But before I go ahead to start writing the code, I'd like to do something a little bit different in this video. So you're going to notice that together with bitcoin.py, I also created a Jupyter notebook. And with this notebook, I intend to show us a little bit how the request module works. So if I open this up, yeah, I went ahead to write a few lines of code already, but no big deal, I've not written a lot. And in this first code block, what I've done is just to import the request module. And if you've not installed the request module yet, you can do so with code like this, pip install request. Then I copied the link that was given to us in the website and I saved it in a variable I called it URL. And so with this link, how are we supposed to get the information we need from the website? If we remember from the hints, we're told that we could use 2 methods from the request library. The first is .get and the second .json. And like I mentioned earlier on, the method get should enable us get the data from the website, and the method JSON should enable us format that data. I'm going to start with the method get, or create a variable or call it response. And in this variable, I'm going to save the data from the website. I'm going to use the request module and use the get function, or rather the get method, and I'll just pass a single parameter to it. That's the URL that we got from the website. So if I run this, you see that there is no output. But I guess you're wondering what's the content of our variable response. So I'm going to print this to give us a better idea of what we've just done. So if I go ahead and print response, so we have an output which does not look like the dictionary we just saw online. But that's okay and correct, because this just tells us that our request module worked just fine and was able to get information from the website. But to format this information in a way that we can see using Python, we're going to use the method JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and write a second line of code here, or create a second variable, or call it JSON response. You can call this anything that you want, and I'm just going to call the method JSON. To do this, I'm going to type response.json with no parameters, and now if I run this, that worked. And if we go ahead and print JSON response instead of response alone, what are we going to see? So JSON response, shift enter, and as we can see, our variable JSON response contains a dictionary. Now this does not look so much like what we saw online, but trust me, it's the same thing. It's just that our Jupyter notebook returned it in a single line of code, I'm guessing to minimize space. And I think it looks a little bit congested, but that's alright. All we need to do is to look for the key USD. So if I scroll back this way, okay, we see that we have our key USD right about here. But this key USD is found in a dictionary whose key is BPI. So this looks a little bit complicated. So what I'll do is to go back to the website, and we're going to use a dictionary there. So what I want us to see is that this is a very dictionary that is contained in our variable JSON response. However, here it looks a lot more cleaner and it's easier to explain with this one. So in this dictionary, we see that there are a number of keys. We have time, disclaimer, chart name, BPI, and I think that's it. And remember, I told you that this is the line that we need. That's the rate in USD. So what we need is this key, the key BPI, and we see that the content of the value of this key BPI is another dictionary which has as key USD. And likewise, the value of this key USD is another dictionary with different keys: code, symbol, rate, description, and rate float. And remember that rate float is the key that we need. And if you recall from previous videos in this course, to access the key rate float, we're going to do a lot of dictionary indexing. So let's go back to VS Code and see what that looks like. So coming back to this line of code, instead of just printing JSON response, we're going to access the key BPI. To do this, we're just going to say JSON response square brackets and in quotes BPI. And as we can see, our interpreter is even helping us to tell us the different keys that are available: BPI, chart name, disclaimer, and time. But the one we need is BPI. So if I go ahead and run this with shift enter, well, you might not have noticed this, but our output has actually reduced. So what I'm going to do is to access our next key, that's USD. I'll go back in here and open another set of square brackets, and still in quotes, I'm going to type USD. And if I run this with shift enter, and once more our code has reduced and we are left with this last dictionary. And if you remember from this dictionary, the key that we need is rate float. So still with indexing, I'm going to open another set of square brackets. Still in quotes, I'm going to enter rate float. And if I run this, finally we have our float. That is 63,719.3114. And this is the price of a Bitcoin in US dollars returned as a float. And all we need to do now is to write code that will be able to get input from the user as a command line argument and multiply that input with this float. I really hope this explanation with Jupyter Notebooks helped, and if so, do well to leave a comment at the end of the video so I will know it was helpful. So right now I'll just go back to our file bitcoin.py and we're going to solve this exercise together. Well, for now our file is still empty, but that's fine since we've already done a major part of the exercise. So from the exercise, we recall that our code should get input from the user as a command line argument, and we were told from the hints that to do this, we should use the module sys. So this would mean we will need two modules to solve this exercise. The first will be request and the second sys. So I'll start by importing these modules. I'll type import sys and import request. So these are the only two modules we need to solve this exercise. And from the nature of the exercise, we know that when the user runs our file bitcoin.py, there should be only two command line arguments. The first, bitcoin.py, and the second, the number of bitcoins that the user wants to buy. And we know that we can check the number of command line arguments the user runs the code with using sys.argv. So I'm going to use an if statement to check this condition. What I'll do is I'll say if len, that's for the length, of sys.argv is equal to 2, that's equal to, I'll start by creating a variable that will contain the link to the Coinbase website like we did before. So I'll just copy the line of code from our Jupyter notebook and paste it in here. And that's done. Now remember that we need to get data from this website, and we're told in the exercise that we should do this in a try except block because a number of errors could result from this. And in this try block, I'm going to get data from the website and convert that data using request.json. And I'll just copy those lines of code from our Jupyter notebook. And with these two lines of code, we should be able to get the data from the website and save it in a variable called response. Format this data using the JSON method and save it in a variable we call it JSON_response. And there's one more thing we need to do in our try block. That's to convert the second command line argument, which corresponds to the number of Bitcoin the user wants to buy, to a float. And we're doing this in the try block because we know this line of code could fail if the user enters input that cannot be converted to a float. Say the user enters something like cat or dog. I'm going to save this in a variable n like we saw online, and I'm going to use the function float to convert this input into a float. And to access the argument, I'm going to type sys.argv at position 1. And so that settles it for the try block. And like I just mentioned, this line of code could fail with a value error. So we're going to catch this in our except block. I'm going to type except of value error. We're told to sys.exit with the message command line argument is not a number. So command line argument is not a number. And we're going to catch a second exception in case of a request error. So I'll go ahead and I'll type except request.request exception. And since the exercise does not specify what to do in this case, I'll just print an error message saying HTTP request failed. And this should do to catch any errors that could result from this code. And finally, if the try block runs successfully, we're going to continue the rest of the code in an else block. And in this else block, I'm going to get the price of a Bitcoin in USD as a float and multiply that price with the user's input. So I'm just going to type else or create a variable or call it coin price. I intend to save the Bitcoin price in this variable, and I'm just going to copy the rest of this line from our Jupyter notebook. So this line of code should return the price of a Bitcoin in US dollars as a float, and with this price, I'll create a second variable or call it amount, and I'm going to multiply the user's input, that's n, with the price of a Bitcoin, so n star coin price. And finally, I'm going to print our output respecting the format that's expected from us. Well, I'm just going to copy this line of code as it was given to us in the hints online. And as we can see, we're printing as an F string the amount in that format. So all of this should work if the user runs the code correctly, that's with two command line arguments. But if that's not the case, and this line of code, line 4, fails, we're going to exit the code with the message missing command line argument. So what I want to do is to come down here, and in an else block, I'm going to sys.exit with the message missing command line argument. And so this should do to solve this exercise. I'm going to save this, or open up my terminal, and we're going to run the code together, test it, and see the way it behaves. I'm going to type python of bitcoin.py, and if I run this, missing command line argument. And this is accurate because we ran the code with only one command line argument. So let me try this again and run the code in the right way. So I'm going to say python of bitcoin.py, and let's say we want 1 Bitcoin. If I run this, so we have 63,854.0075. And as we can see, the code behaves properly. Well, I don't really know the current price of a Bitcoin, but I want to believe that's the exact value that you will get from the website. Let me try this again, and instead of 1, let's say 2. And if I run this, we have 127,760.2984 US dollars. One thing I want you to note is that if you do the multiplication of this by 2, you're not going to get this. And well, that's not an error. That's simply because this code gets data real time from the website, and the value of a Bitcoin changes over time. And so it's very possible that the value might have changed in the few seconds that it took us to run this code this time and this time. And if I run this one more time, and instead of 2 I say 1 and I press enter, you see that this value is not the same like this one. So well, I guess that settles it for this exercise, and I think the code is easy and clear enough for everyone. If you have any questions, like always, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be more than pleased to answer you. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I look forward to seeing you in my upcoming videos. That said, have a good day.